Hello, I'm Dr. Ryan England, coming to you from Daytona State College, and this is CEN3722, in human-computer interaction, and this is starting now into the meat of this class, is Understanding Users Part 1, where we're really going to start delving into the design process. So really the importance of this lecture and getting into the guts of this now is how to understand users, how to understand the different types of users, people from the novice to the expert level, and how to deal with the different personal characteristics, physical characteristics, cultural characteristics of the users that you're going to deal with, and understanding all that together. So we're going to look at how we're going to develop the concept of a user profile so that we can get a better understanding of users. We're going to look at how we're going to gather information from users, because the key to user interface design is feedback. And if you've got to have different ways that you're going to get the feedback, how to actually develop questionnaires and surveys of the users, and how to get information and useful information from your interviews and surveys. So first I'm going to start with a design example. And hopefully you can read this. Outlook Express could not be started because it failed to wait on a system mutex. Your computer may be low on memory or is unstable. This is a design example because do you have any idea what a system mutex is and how it's actually going to affect the behavior of your system, or even what to do if your system is unstable? Come on, guys, really? Is this a useful message? Well, let's go into understanding our users. Now, there could be users that do understand this. Let's understand our users. The basics. We need to know who is our user, what is it that they're trying to accomplish, and what is the environment in which they're trying to accomplish it. Okay? If we understand the basics, we're going to do very well with the user interface design. So why do we study the users? Well, hopefully this is obvious to everybody, because I can't say it enough. Bad design products fail. Good design products hopefully succeed, but poorly designed products always fail. Okay, it's the users who decide to use a product, not the designer. Okay, so we need to know a little bit about the understanding of the users and what do they bring to the table. Because when you're designing a system, it's not just again, we deal with a two-way interaction here. That understanding the users and what they can do and their capabilities and what it is that they're trying to do and their understanding of the subject. Okay, this is what's going to help you get a successful system and do good design. So first, let's look at some of the personal characteristics of the users themselves. The biggie, knowledge and experience. Okay, what do the users bring to the system that okay, this allows you to actually get groups of users. So if you're designing a system for high-end users and only for high-end users, that's going to be different from something that's designed for the general public. So things like the level of education, the language, how well they type, how computer literate, all those are things that are characteristics of the users. Realize they can be different in every single user. But it goes deeper than that. Their learning styles, okay? What kind of assistance do they need? What kind of assistance do they prefer? What kind of tools do they need? What kind of tools do they know how to use? What kind of tools do they prefer? And what type of literally physical differences do they have? Okay? Hearing impaired, sight impaired, color blindness, all have different things that you have to take into account with the design. So, a profiled understanding of your user and also what you're trying to accomplish with their system are going to be crucial to the system's success. Cultural differences. If you're designing for simply English users in America, you don't deal with the variety of cultural issues that you're going to deal with if you're trying to design a system that's international or multi-language. And a good example of this is all systems that we're used to have a help menu, good old H-E-L-P. Well, if you translate help literally in French, it comes out as à ce quoi. Well, in French, that means help, as in, I need immediate assistance right now, I'm going to die. Okay, it's a cry for help, not actually just saying I need assistance. So understanding those little cultural differences are going to be important if you're designing systems that have to be dealt with, that you have to use in multiple cultures. So let's classify users to start with. This might make things a little bit easier. First, the concept of the novice user, and the novice user is going to be the most challenging user in almost every single case to deal with, even though many times I always think it's the expert user that's challenging to deal with. Then you've got the user that's between the novice and the expert, that they're knowledgeable in a system, they're knowledgeable in systems in general, they're intermittent users. This ability, though, however, to classify our populations allows us the ability to focus the design. There is no average person. Okay, it's very challenging to design for individuals. Okay, I won't say it's impossible, but I will say it's incredibly challenging. Though most design will say it really is impossible to design for that individual user. Well, the truth of the matter is if you can design a system that is actually able to change on the user, that the system itself learns the user, there's a holy grail there to work for. So looking at this classification, the majority of the time, the user that you're designing for is the one in the middle. But realizing that the one on both ends are the ones that are the most challenging, the novice and the expert users. So let's deal first with that novice user. Very little level of experience, not familiar with the system, may not have anything to build a mental model on, which means that the mental processing that is involved with using your system is going to be slow and laborious. It's going to be very challenging for them to do this, meaning that they're going to need a lot of help along the way. They're going to need a scaffold. They're going to need a basis to build the mental model. They're going to need the basis to actually come up with a metaphorical example of what is in the background that'll help them learn this. So for example, the simple login system. An expert does not need any instructions whatsoever to use a login system. But if you've never seen a login system before, just being presented the interface for a login system doesn't mean you're going to know how to use it. You don't know what to expect. So the set of instructions necessary for a novice to use a login system, a true novice, can be extremely lengthy. And even an explanation of what does it mean to actually log into a system, to get access to the resources that are inside the system that are not available to you if you don't log in. All things that you would have to think about. So, when dealing with novices, the first thing is that every step, everything they do is going to need some level of feedback. The feedback can be simple. It can be a ding, a sound, something like that, but they're going to need to know that something is actually occurring. Okay, the initiative when you're dealing with novices typically comes from the computer, much more than it would with an expert, but many times completely. The system prompts you. What would you like to do next? Here's your list of choices. Do you wish to do this? Here's your list of choices. Okay, simple, scaffolded steps. Novices like things like wizards that take them through the individual steps, whereas experts will want to completely bypass the wizard and just get the job done. So, user expectations, which we've talked about quite a bit, are going to be extremely important to the novice user. That what actually occurs and what the processes are to get something done must follow their set of expectations, which means that you have to understand what those expectations are, which means that you're going to have to find out what those expectations are. Visibility, having everything on screen. Remember, there's no mental model to move back on in the mind of the novice, meaning that if they can't see it, if it isn't there present, it doesn't exist. When giving feedback to the novice, many times if you're dealing with the concept of an expert, a piece of feedback would be, do you wish to continue? Okay, that doesn't work for the novice. The novice needs to know what actually is occurring. Why are you being prompted in the first place? Is there a problem? What is the problem? And what are my available set of actions available to deal with whatever the situation is, and presented very upfront and very clearly for the novice. So, as you can see, there's a lot that you have to think of when you're dealing with the novices. Also, you have to give them a very limited set of possibilities. Whereas an expert can maybe be able to deal with a tremendous list, large menus, the novice needs to have all the rest of that filtered out to just get to the meat of what the things are that they know how to do. So this allows them to build on the knowledge as they open up more capability within the system as they get better. But at that first level, it's the simple system. Limit the number of menu choices, limit the number of menus, limit the number of options. And you should always present a response. If there's some sort of request for the user to do something, you need to present that and you need to give the feedback. Help has always got to be available for those novice users. And it's also important to understand how the novice user likes to get their help. Okay, do they want the feedback? You know, for most novices, the human is the person that they want to be able to get feedback from. So when dealing with building a system for novice users, you're probably going to have the helpline, or as in many computer systems, the live chat. But even then, users, novice users may not understand what is the concept of a live chat, that I can click on something and an actual human's going to be behind that, able to help me out. Or in many cases, especially in IT departments, they just simply say, let me take over your computer. Click on that icon right there, and I'm going to take control and take care of your problem. But that is help, and that is very important for the individual knowledge, the knowledge necessary to help novice users really appreciate and move into your system. If you're going to have complex systems that need to go into the use of novice users, you're going to have to really think about how you're going to progress these novice users through the entire interface to get to where you want them to be. Now, the intermittent users that are knowledgeable, they're not anywhere near as challenging as the novice users. Consistency, they will have a mental model. They'll have pictures of how they expect the system to work. And if you are consistent with that set of expectations, the system will be successful. They're still going to need documentation and help, the things that the novice users need, but not at the level of which a novice user would need it. The expert user is a case unto themselves, okay? They are really going to be most interested in how the system can be used quickly to get the job done. They're going to understand all the background metaphors. Control paste to them is a quick move of a hand without even hardly any thought. Very complex tasks to them will have keyboard shortcuts that they can move through very quickly. And when you watch an expert user move on a computer, a novice user or even an intermittent user has a very difficult time following just at the speed at which an expert user will move through a system, because that is the level of expertise. It's become an autonomous thing. But important to that expert user is the ability to get the job done quickly. Okay. So we can move on from the expert users and now look at how do we actually build the profiles of our users. So the concept of a user profile. Now, user profiles are really built so that you have an understanding of the user. And the information that you wish to gather is the information that will be useful to you as a designer to design a system for that specific user. So what kind of things can we get from user profiles? Well, type of information that might be useful to you would be things like their education, their physical capabilities, how experienced are they, and how experienced are they with systems that are similar to the system that you're developing. Do they have previous training? Have they used a system that is one of the competitors? Do they have specific skill sets that are useful to the tasks and the functions of the system that you're designing? So you build the user profile with information. So like an example here would be the user is knowledgeable, average age of 37 years, had experience with similar systems for 2.3 years. Important to a user profile also is not just the average, but if you're building a profile of users, you need to know that that entire group of users has some level of experience. So if the average is 2.3, but half of them have 0 and half of them have 5 years of experience, or you need to know that they've all had some level of experience. Are they good with a keyboard? Are they good with a mouse? That type of information. And you can do this by actually asking questions, by profiling the individual users. How many years have you been using a computer system? Giving them a survey or a questionnaire that gathers this information. And profile information is relatively easy to gather by using this type of mechanism, which, simply a survey. The two mechanisms that you're going to use most often to gather information from the users is the interview and the questionnaire. Okay, the interview being you're going to sit down and talk to them, okay, or you're going to talk to them over the phone, or you're going to Skype with them, and then the questionnaire, which is simply a mechanism of something that they fill out. It can be a piece of paper questionnaire, it can be an online questionnaire. Knowing how to put these two together to get your information is going to be important to you if you're going to know your user enough to develop a good design. So let's start with the concept of the interview, and let's deal with the two types of interviews that you might be doing, the structured and the unstructured interview. The structured interview, we've all been in the structured interview. There's a preset group of questions. Okay, the interviewer will often say, well, my question says, what is your name? How old are you? Have you ever used this system before? Every question is laid out, and there is the ability to explore a little bit, but you're really stuck to the structure of the interview. As you have interviewers that have high levels of expertise in turning the interview into useful information and understand the purposes of the interview, you can now move to unstructured interviews, where essentially you just have topics. The interview may say, we're going to talk about your level of expertise with similar systems to such and such. Okay. Very useful, however, in the design phases of any type of system. They're exploratory in nature, and they're exploratory by nature. You are trying to gather information where you really don't know where the information is leading you. So many times you may start with an unstructured group of interviews in the design. You may move to a group of structured interviews where you now are refining down your information, and then you may move on to the next one, which is the questionnaire and survey. The questionnaires and surveys also have different types of questions that you ask, both open-ended and closed-ended questions. So when you're dealing with something like a closed-ended question, the user is really stuck to a series of choices that you've given them. But they're very good for gaining things like the attitude of a user or the level of experience of a user. So, for example, in your own estimation, what do you find to be the biggest problem in the system? Well, there's a group of choices there. Or, I liked this system, rate 1 through 5, where 1 is I hated it and 5 is I loved it. Okay, that level of where are they along a spectrum. Open-ended questions are simply open-ended. You ask the question and you give them just a free area to respond to it. So now, in my experience, I really like open-ended questions, realizing that the amount of effort to process open-ended questions is way more than you have with closed-ended questions, okay? But you can get more useful information often out of an open-ended questions than you can out of the closed-ended questions. But it's going to take more effort on your part, and it's going to take more time for the respondents. So it may or may not be the best way to get it done. Closed-ended questions are great when you have data that you need to standardize. You need to come up with an average. Okay, they loved, they'd hated. Okay, somewhere along the way, where scale of 1 to 5, our average is 4.2. They pretty much loved the system, but I had 20% who hated it. That type of data, which is useful data. Okay, it limits the responses of the users, but it can give you useful information. Now, when you're developing questions for a survey of any type, you really got to look at two things, purposeful and concrete. For one, you should never ask too many questions on a survey. You need to keep it limited, because what's going to happen is they're going to start Christmas treeing the survey when they get tired of doing it, or you have to get to question 155, you're just done. You don't want to answer any more questions, so you don't. You just stop. That's why it's important that surveys should be concise, but also the questions need to have those two pieces, purposeful and concrete. What is it? What that question needs to give you useful information that you can use in your system design, and it needs to be something that the user can really understand and answer. Okay? If it's not one of those two things, don't include it, because it's just going to be a distraction to those questions that are purposeful and complete. And I can't stress that more than enough. If you're gathering information, purposeful and concrete, or leave it out. Okay? Short, complete, understandable. The user should be able to easily understand. In fact, you often have user groups to design the survey that you need to collect information from your user groups. The last little piece of information we're going to talk about is the concept of scales. And scales are really straightforward, because oftentimes we want to be able to put the knowledge in the concept of a scale. Is this very important to you? Is this not very important at all? Okay. Did you enjoy it or did you hate it? Okay. We do this all the time. We survey all the time. I go into Amazon. I love the product. I hated the product. I can give a review. Okay. I've got a scale. I've got a closed-ended question. I can put a number in there, and then I can write up a little bit of a review that goes with it and how the people can get my information. So, in summary, and we covered a lot in this, and this is just part one of understanding our users. You need to be able to understand as best as you can your users. You're going to have to build the users into groups. Common grouping is novice, intermediate, expert. Okay? Understanding the needs of all the individual users and what users are going to use your system. Okay, you're going to have to define this. You're going to have to be able to build profiles of your users to get that understanding. Okay, you're going to have to understand how the user profiles are actually created and how you can gather the information to build those user profiles and make that all usable information that you can do in system design. So, part one, understanding the users. Know thy user and you know thy system. Okay, we're going to come on to part two next, but hopefully this is getting you on a good start of understanding your user. This is Dr. Ron Eaglin checking out from Daytona State College.